Is that better?
Yeah, a lot better. A lot better.
Okay, it picked up the wrong mic. That's my apologies. So Alex was talking about psychological safety, and I'm sure he described how Google did the study on the most successful teams. And yes, that applies to Google, but that also applies to families, friend groups, jobs. Anytime that you can make someone feel like they're allowed to make suggestions and they're not going to be ridiculed for it, that is super important. And a lot of classrooms get it wrong, and they expect innovation, they expect new grand ideas. But if there's no psychological safety, if the students or whoever's at the bottom of the food chain, if they don't feel safe to make a suggestion that might get ridiculed in other environments, they're not going to even make the suggestion. They're going to read what the leaders are doing and try to emulate it. That's the trend. And you do not want that, especially in a student run business or in any company, quite frankly. The best companies on the planet are the best because they foster an environment of psychological safety. And so I just want to hit on that again. That is so important. I'm going to share my screen and do this whole learning triad thing. So this stool is just a little graphic that I made to represent the three large elements of learning: content, skill, and will. Content is what most classrooms will focus on, basically, right? We got to get through chapter 3 because then there's a test and then there's state testing or whatever. Content is usually king. It dominates the other two categories. Skill is your ability to learn new things. So of course, there's YouTube and there's forums and there's lots of other resources, but there is a skill in finding and generating new ideas. So what I like to do, and this applies to students and teachers, what I like to do is if somebody has a question for me, I'll say, well, what have you looked up so far? And they're like, well, I don't know. I just came to you to ask a question. Like, no, don't make the teacher the expert that has all the answers, because you're training them to suppress their own creative thinking, and you're training them to instead just come to you when there's a question. And that's a really bad thing. It might seem great, like the teacher feels powerful, I guess. I don't know. There's an ego thing in there for a lot of teachers, especially at the university level, where the professor needs to feel like the smartest person in the room. But that's very dangerous because you've already I don't want to use too many psychology terms, but it's like the training of mice or an elephant. When you train them, Pavlov's dogs actually is the classic example, right? You ring a bell, the dog gets food. Ring a bell, dog gets food. You ring a bell, the dog salivates, right? It starts slobbering. And that's because we've trained the dog that when the bell rings, you get food. Well, the same thing happens when the teacher just simply answers the question. Well, how do I do this? Well, the answer is this. That helps no one. If you're in a hurry, I get it. That sometimes that's the answer. But a lot of the times a better answer is, well, what could we look up? What have you looked up? Who else have you asked? And what words did you use? So there's communication skills there. And that skill is very underdeveloped in classrooms where they've been taught that the instructor or teacher has all the answers. And that's very dangerous. Finally, the will. The will is simply the motivation to. Am I willing to? Do I have the motivation to try to learn new things that are foreign to me? Something I have no idea about. Do I feel confident enough to go after it and try to learn it on my own, even though I know I'm going to make tons of mistakes? Do I have the will to do it? So my question to you is, if you look at all three of these, which one is most important? If you had to pick one, which one's most important?
Will, having the will and determination to do this task.
Will. Because if you only have content, they don't know how to learn new things and they don't care to learn new things. Content by itself is almost useless. Skill, if you have the skill to learn it, but you just don't care, you don't have the motivation to do it, and you don't know enough to actually learn new things, right? The more content you know, the better questions you might ask, right? To get deeper into any subject, whether it's business or physics, doesn't matter. But will is the only one that if that's all you have, you can get the other two, right? As long as you stay motivated. And so the question becomes, if we're going to focus on will as a key component, not just the content, right? How to write a business plan, how to make a website, all those fun things, that's all content. But if you don't inspire innovation and creativity and the safety to do so, the will disintegrates and the whole stool falls over. So my daughter she's now 12, but she has a lot of motivation to learn things. She doesn't actually know that much about coding or making websites, and she's really interested in making video games in Unity now. And so this is kind of what her three-legged stool might look like. She has all kinds of will. She's like so hungry to learn things. She feels safe to learn things. So I gave her a Raspberry Pi and we started learning about operating systems to put on there and other fun things you can do on there. And that, by the way, those are snap circuits. It's like how to connect things electrically, which is kind of fun as an aside. But a Raspberry Pi, if you're not familiar, is basically that's the whole computer. USB, HDMI ports, Ethernet, all that right on one board. And for her 6th birthday, she wanted a coding birthday, which I thought was awesome. I did not tell her to, but it was great. And she made all these little games to play with her cousins, little coding activities. She ran the whole thing. And one thing I learned from that was all I had to do was give her the psychological safety to want to learn new things. And no, she's not an expert at any of this stuff, but she felt so confident to be able to teach other people this stuff because she had the will. And now she's learning the skill, she's learning the content, but she has the motivation to do that. And that's been amazing. Then this happened. She went to school. And I don't know what your school's like, but a lot of the schools in the US only focus on that content. These other legs of the stool start to get beat out of them mentally. The content becomes king. Memorize it, memorize it, memorize it. That's all that matters. But if you start that at a young age and you drill it into the students over and over again, that the content is king, it is so important. But forget about these other legs of the stool. I like to ask my students, you all were in kindergarten once, yes? And in kindergarten, when the teacher would ask, doesn't matter the question, 20 hands would go up out of 21 students, right? They all had an answer. And they'd call on somebody, nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, good job, Johnny, you got it right. Awesome. Why did 20 out of 21 hands go up? Because they still, at that age, felt safe to just throw an answer out there. Fast forward to grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. I ask a question, doesn't matter what it is, and 0 to 1 or 0 to 3 hands go up. Why is that? They all have ideas. They're thinking in their mind, it might be this, I'm not sure. But they don't feel safe enough to throw an answer out there. And so whether you're a student or a teacher, it's critical from the teacher's perspective to foster the environment where content is not the king. Will is number one. Content and skill, they're kind of equal to me. I don't know. Each situation is a little different. So my fear is that as Madeline goes through school, my daughter, that this happens. Content, everything, skill and will, but whatever. Not even an afterthought. It's not thought of at all. It's ignored completely. Content, content, content. So the question then becomes, so if will is so important, and hopefully I've made that argument, but if will is so important, how do you develop that? You can't just tell a class, hey, you're safe to make suggestions or throw ideas out or an answer that may be incorrect. Don't worry, you're safe. Saying those words does nothing. It's a culture of innovation and psychological safety. Well, what does that mean? The culture is whoever's in charge needs to model it. When the person in charge is wrong about something, they should not just accept it. They should spotlight it. They should say, I just got to hold on. Whatever you guys are doing, I'm going to stop what you're doing. And I just want to show you this like really silly mistake that I just made. I was working on this and I put in this code, or I did this in WordPress, or this in the business, the finances, whatever. Look at how I messed up. What should I have done? Like I totally screwed this up. And making it okay, and not just okay, but expected. Like there's going to be screw ups. So try it. So jump in and try it. But if the person in charge that most of the students have been trained to imitate, if that person in charge is not modeling strong psychological safety tendencies and creating that environment, the kids aren't going to either. And if you want a business that's going to be successful, especially a student-run business, you've got to foster that environment or nothing else matters. I don't care how much HTML, WordPress, whatever you want to do as a business. I don't care if you're making wooden coasters. It's not going to work unless there's a psychological safety component. So how do you develop the will? Well, I will give you a little insight. This is an awesome book by Lonnie Moore. With help from Stephen Covey, who you may know from the Love Languages, if you've ever read that. Very popular book about understanding how people express care and affection for each other. But anyways, the high trust classroom, if your students don't trust you and each other, the teacher, and each other, the students, you will pay what's called the trust tax, which means no hands go up when you ask a question. The trust tax, you can walk into any classroom. I can spend 3 minutes in a classroom, somebody else's classroom, and I can pretty well evaluate if they have high trust with their students or not. And finally, if you've never read Daniel Pink's The Puzzle of Motivation, he's got a great TED Talk. Watch that. I would highly suggest that. I want to talk about purpose, autonomy, and mastery, because this is all to develop will, right? We're looking at that one leg of the stool. How do you develop that? Purpose. Do they know why they're doing what they're doing? Or is it just, here, write this code. Here, build this website, design this logo. If you don't tell them why they're doing it and why it's important, there's no purpose. Autonomy, which means they get to choose. And Alex knows this. I rarely will say, hey, you're in charge of this project. I need you to do this and this and this. I'll say, hey, is anybody available to do this? I've got an interesting project here. And then, some people will be like, yeah, I'm interested. Great. But they need to have choice in the matter. Yes, some jobs kind of suck and they're not fun to do, like tracking the finances, for instance. Well, some people might like that. I don't really care. But they need to have choice in it. And they can pick the steps beyond that. Just like Alex running this whole Globe project, like he has complete autonomy because I trust Alex. Alex has earned my trust and he is able to run all this stuff. And I know, I don't care if there's mistakes. I would make the same ones. It's fine. But he has choice to do what he wants with it. And finally, mastery. That is, they see growth in themselves. They see growth in each other. But if you, as the instructor and students, by the way, if you can create this in each other to help people feel these three things, the overlap right there, the Venn diagram, right, is intrinsic motivation. It is where all these things come together. And it seems like almost like magic starts to happen. Things get smoother. The processes become not automated, but more things happen. More innovation happens, more ideas, more brainstorming. Everything runs smoother because people are intrinsically motivated. So I just talked for a long time and I apologize, but it's something I'm very passionate about. Are there questions? Anything that maybe didn't come across very clear?
I have a quick question. So what can we as students do to promote the will factor? Like you talked about kind of following the leader as a student to a teacher, but how can we develop that as a classroom?
As a student, I think it's important to first approach the instructor and say, and maybe the student knows more about this stuff than the teacher, and that's very common. And it's important not to come across anytime you're going to propose something to like an instructor, you have to realize that some instructors have an ego imbalance where as soon as they feel like students know as much or heaven forbid more than the teacher, they get insecure. So what you can do is approach the teacher and say, I've been learning about these different ways to try to help, our business grow. Would it be okay if, or even better yet, if you're able to make them think it's their idea, that's a masterful way to get things done. If you can ask a questions like, hey, teacher, I'm trying to find a way to help other students feel like they can be more innovative. And, just asking the questions that almost have easy answers once you understand all this stuff. But then if the teacher's like, what if you've already won. As soon as they start proposing the idea, they believe it's their idea. They're not threatened egocentrically or, well, that's basically it. But suggesting those things and say, I understand the content is really important, but I also think these other things are really important. And so it's a delicate balance of suggesting ways of doing things without stepping on toes. So it is very difficult as a student. And if that teacher's not receptive, you may not get anywhere with it. There's not always going to be like, well, if I propose all this stuff and show these cool slides, they're going no. Ultimately, that teacher has to be receptive to it. Or the parent, if you're trying to convince a parent like, hey, I'm responsible enough to do blank, blank. So as the student, you can foster the environment with each other in private, right? And if you want to approach the teacher, just do it in a delicate way that is not going to offend the teacher as like, look, I got a better way than you teach. I know better. You might know better, but suggesting it that way, you've already lost. So that's the best I got for you. Other questions?
So you talked about the skill factor, or the skill and content factor. So you had kind of talked about how when a student comes up to you and they ask you a question, you ask, well, what did you look up? So how do we know kind of the difference between cheating when looking something up and looking something up trying to learn?
So that's all based on the premise of how the teacher runs the classroom. I look at artificial intelligence, Google, all those kinds of things. I see those as assets. Yes, there are some things you need to memorize. Think of the alphabet, numbers, right? There are certain things you need to memorize. It's just helpful to memorize. Multiplication tables, whatever. But it is all from the perspective of, and unfortunately, you're at the mercy of that teacher and their perspective on how the classroom should be run. Because some people are like, nope, you need to memorize A through 2000 over here. I realize that's a jump, but it's sad that some classrooms are ran in a way that the students have their hands tied, almost like they're handcuffed. Like, no, maybe you're allowed to make a little teeny note card of notes, or here's what it comes down to. The teacher's asking the wrong questions. If I'm asking you, what is the result of this formula? I feel like it's already the wrong question. The question would be, what's the best formula? Can we write a better formula? Right? Whether it's robotics, artificial intelligence, writing code, building a website, doesn't matter. Right? You should be able to look up the information, because ask the teacher themselves and be like, hey, when you're looking up how to write a lesson plan, I don't know, whatever teachers do, were they allowed to look it up? Yeah, because they just had to accomplish certain objectives. Why do we then handcuff the student and say, nope, I look up stuff for what I do, but you're a student, so you have to do it this way. You have to memorize all these things. Why? Why make them do that? Why not say, well, what's the bigger question here? And then, yeah, absolutely, look it up. You don't know how to edit an image. What are different ways to edit an image? Is it an app on your phone? Is it a website? Is it a Photoshop that we have to pay money for? What? Like, okay, tell me, what are the benefits? One costs money. Why does it cost money? Right? There's all these questions that then come out of it that is more like a real job. I can't tell you a job where your boss is going to be like, yeah, I need you to learn this new skill, but I need you to just memorize these pages of the book. What boss tells their employees that? When there's money on the line and efficiency is at stake, efficiency equals more profit, right? They're not going to make you memorize stuff. They're going to say, get it done. I don't care how you get it done. So in answer to your question, unfortunately, the ego of the teacher sometimes trumps that. But I think the wrong questions are being asked.
Yeah, definitely agree. Just kind of conversating with you here. It's just interesting because it feels kind of like brain rot to me. It feels like the education system has just kind of influenced the students to think that they're not allowed to look anything up. Like, I'll be completely transparent with you guys, and I've been that way the whole class. A lot of the stuff I've had prior knowledge of, but in order to give you guys a full understanding, I look stuff up. I sit down. So right now the class starts at 9 p.m. for me. I sit down around 8 p.m. I go through each of my bullet points that I had listed. I find different websites. I've tried to show you guys videos. That didn't quite work. So I found some regular pages of text. We kind of went through those, and I couldn't do that without using the internet. And Mr. Suter talked about asking questions. So the questions we ask, we can simply plug into Google. Like, Google will know most of the answers for those. Like, you talked about editing an image. So I can type on my computer, what's the best way to edit an image? And there's all these different results. So, and then it's up to us humans to see which one we think is best. And
that's the real skill, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Which search result do I pick and spend time on learning? That's a skill in itself.
Yeah. And then, so we as students are expected to like not ask the questions and not do the research. And it's just really terrible. But it's definitely helpful in a work environment. I've learned that, definitely, even with teaching this class. The internet is okay to use in a professional workspace. I can't tell you. So I took Mr. Suter's, we did an intro to coding or programming class, and I can't tell you how many times I looked up, how do I make ball move right? Like, just these really basic questions, and the internet has a lot of answers for you. So nothing has to be you creating these processes and plugging in, checking, see if everything will work. Like, the internet has a lot of valuable resources that aren't necessarily cheating. Can
I just point out 3 things that just took place in that one question? You had the will to look it up. You're like, I can learn this. You had the skill to ask the correct questions in the right search engine or whatever. And you had enough content knowledge to phrase the question in a way that might get you an answer. The more content you have, yeah, the more technical your questions can get. You level up, right? From beginning coder to NASA or something, right? So what he just demonstrated was he had the will, he knew the skill on how to ask the question and what words to use, the content. That's a balanced tripod right there. That's what we're after.
Now he's just trying to boost my ego. No, but like for real, that's what a teacher can kind of do, is to help build up that will factor. So definitely a sense of psychological safety in Mr. Suter's class, and that's what I'm trying. I'm trying to get that from you guys. I get it. It's definitely a change of pace, and that's just kind of life. And just kind of the unfortunate errors with education. He talked about how in preschool and kindergarten, everyone raised their hand, everyone was excited, and it really does suck that now in high school we're just all quiet and we just kind of sit there like, well, what's the real answer? Like, we as students need to kind of think about that, and most of the times the teacher goes over the answer and you're like, well, I already knew that. Like, that's what it's gonna be. Like, you're probably gonna know the answer, and if you didn't, it's really not a big deal. School is learning. School is failure, and it's not sometimes, which that's when we start getting bad grades. But yeah, does anyone else have any other questions or anything else to chip in on that?
Mr. Suter, I don't know, but I would invite you, I'd like to invite you, should I rephrase that question? How would it be? Would you like to address the teachers of the International Hindu School for an hour about your teaching techniques? It would be nice because we have 75 teachers, some postgraduate teachers, some teach the middle school, some teach the primary school. So that is something very important, because it's very, what you were talking about was the rote system, ROTE, that, you memorize.
Rote memorization, yeah.
So the new education policy of in India is discouraging all that, and they have lots of new ideas. But I like your idea of giving the students the psychological safety that they feel that they will not be put down if they come up with an answer, because this is very common in the classroom. We see here, you have any questions? No, we don't have any questions. You have any ideas? They don't come up with a spontaneous answer. So I appreciate, we'll talk about your address to the teachers at a different time, if it is all right.
Yeah, happy to chat further on that at a different time.
Yeah.
Sir, I was having a question. Sir, like you said, we 11th grader or in the 10th grade, we are not able to answer the question or put up a question. The teacher asked. So, sir, what's the solution for that? That we should muster the courage to ask the question or answer the solution, whatever the result will be.
I heard part of it. If you're not able to ask the question.
Sir, like sometimes, as you said, that when teacher put up the question, we are not able to answer, like in the 11th grade, rather than when we are in the kindergarten. So, sir, how do we push ourselves to ask the questions or answer the questions?
So you're saying if the students really have no idea what to answer?
Yes, sir. Or
yes.
Whether they are having a sort of some confusion whether the answer is right or wrong, and they are not putting and they are not saying the answers, and also situation they are not asking the questions.
So there's a couple of things at play here. One is, if you have even the remotest idea, that psychological safety, that's most likely controlled largely by the instructor or whoever the authority in the room is. But it is up to the teacher, and this is part of the job of teaching that a lot of people don't understand, is there's something called the zone of proximal development, the ZPD, which is essentially I'm talking to, as if I'm the instructor, I'm talking to my class in a way that they understand and not talking over their heads. You've probably watched a video or heard a speaker and you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about. You're really not learning anything because it's almost in a foreign language because you just aren't able to grasp the concepts. So part of the teacher's job then, and this is on them, is to figure out where the students are in their development in whatever the topic is, and then level them up a little bit. In giving in psychological safety, all that stuff, the whole way, that whole learning journey is, and it's very difficult. That's one of the toughest things as a teacher is how do you teach a room full of students and each student is at a different level? That's really the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges. And so I would put that on the teacher. There's a concept called Eli 5, which is a thing on Reddit. Anyways, it stands for explain like I'm 5. Explain the concept like I'm 5 years old. So if I'm trying to explain how HTML code works, I can't use technical terms. How do I explain that to my 5-year-old son or daughter? Sometimes you have to do that to get students up to a baseline so that once the questions are asked, they might have informed potential answers. But if the teacher's asking questions and nobody has any idea, it's probably the teacher's fault because they're asking questions that are not within the zone of proximal development is the technical term, but it's not within their range of I can grasp the idea. I might be wrong, but I'm willing to take a stab at it, right? There's the psychological safety again, etc. But it has to be within their developmental zone. I don't know if I answered the question or not, but
it's fine because like in America, we have that phrase, talk as if a 5th grader can understand.
yeah, Eli 5.
Something like that. I saw that recently. We want to introduce ways so that the students can learn meditation, focus their mind so that they are not wandering, and develop self-control. Because the concept is that if you don't have your self-control, then your mind will drive you nuts.
Sure.
So there is a book, yoga book by Patanjali. Patanjali was a yogi 2,200 years ago. And he wrote in Sanskrit, very tough Sanskrit, how to develop your mind. And so I went to the artificial intelligence and I asked questions at different levels. Please explain the 8 steps of yoga so that an 8th grader can understand. And I could see the concept.
That's exactly what that is.
Yeah.
That's the ZPD before it was termed. Yes. Same idea.
So,
yeah.
So whatever is published, artificial intelligence will draw from that and will come up with an answer. Then I ask the question, please explain this 8 steps of yoga for a 4th grader. A different answer came, much more simple. So this is very important what you're saying. I agree with you.
Great.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions about the whole class? Because you've pretty much just been hearing my point of view and my perspective from it all. So are there any questions about the whole class that maybe you would like explained differently or in just a different manner than how I explained it? If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. All right. Well, Mr. Shooter, thank you for your time and a very
Absolutely.
insightful speech.
Sometimes I go off on my soapbox and I can't stop. So I
So do
enjoy
I.
it though.
So do I.
Awesome.
We even got distracted the other day. I think it was yesterday. We went on about AI taking over the world basically for about
Oh,
10
yeah.
minutes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. And now I've been playing with Sonu or Suno or whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
Suno, for those of you who don't know, if you look up suno.com, you type in a short description and it gives you about a minute and a half long song. Completely original. It's incredible. It's very scary.
It is. It's pretty sweet. But no, pleasure to be here. Glad to see all of you. Have a good night. Have a good morning, I guess.
Have a good morning. Yes.
Yeah. All right. All right. We'll see you guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. So yeah, that was a very insightful. He taught a very similar lesson, showed some of the same slides to us in his technology and entrepreneur class. So that's the class that I take right now. It's called Grit 9. So he showed us all that, and I saw that for the first time, and it was very insightful. Definitely went home and thought about that one. So we'll go in. We've got about 20 more minutes left.